How technologies can become future makers? Answer to this question is related to some revolutions. In 14th century and before, everybody would have an access to information only when was a monk, and information was highly secured, precious stone that was available in monasteries. And then the printing revolution came, and what happened was that the information became the external thing. Everybody could have an access to printed papers and books and information. Another revolution that happened in our world was the revolution related to intelligence. You have heard a lot about robots who can learn from each other. They can really make associations on what they can see and what they can observe. If we make a face like this, the robot will definitely understand that we are happy. The robot right now is definitely our partner, and the era that we are right now living in is the era of intelligence, which is becoming the external thing. The third revolution that has an access on corporations is the fact that also innovation has become the external thing. We were quite used to the fact that innovations come from the corporate world, from people who are based in skyscrapers. But right now, innovations happen in places like this one, like Mindspace, Coworks, a space for young people who are rebels, young people who are bold and they want to change the world. So innovation becomes an external thing. If corporations embrace this fact that innovation is an external thing, then they can go on the path of the future makers. Startups are really an important part of our lives, and every corporation, basically every corporation has experienced that. Right here you can see Wells Fargo, one of the biggest banks in the US. And you can see that practically every functionality and every part of the offering of the bank is right now disrupted by a startup or several startups. Wells Fargo actually is the company that also has undermined, you may say, the trust to the corporations. There were some criminal behaviors last year, you may have heard about them, and actually over 5,000 employees of Wells Fargo were fired, and there were some behaviors that might be called criminal, because the employees were opening fake accounts and they were just taking money without knowledge of their customers into their pockets. But Wells Fargo is not the only corporation that has got such a bad record. We may remember Volkswagen, who has programmed a very nice piece of software that was cheating on the waste of the cars. So right now, corporation is not associated with a very trustful organization. And on the contrary, it is startups that really build trust. And you may see it and you may experience it when you are observing ICOs or when you go to Kickstarter, or when you just see how people make payments on peer-to-peer basis. So startups really are great in building trust, and it turns out that customers really have no problem with taking this kind of little risk with cooperating with small organizations. And they like people who look a little bit like them, right? We like people who are similar to us. So We are ordinary people, startuppers are ordinary people, we can cooperate with them. So, are we facing the dawn of corporations? No, of course not. Of course not. Corporations can disrupt themselves. And right now I've got three possible activities or ways that corporation can go in order to disrupt itself. So what are they? The path number one is to get closer to startups. You can get closer to startups thanks to running acceleration programs and running pilots with startups. You can make partnerships, you can make startups your vendors, and of course you can invest and mentor and support startups in making them bigger and greater, because those worlds really are somehow dependent on each other. Startups need cooperation in order to grow. One of the nice examples of the partnership is the Sphero and Disney, and I like this example very much, and BB-8 that can be controlled by your mobile phone, a great proof that corporation can be very successful in cooperation with the startup. The lessons that are learned out of this getting closer to startups are the following. First of all, you have to make really quick decisions, and times matter. Because the startup usually is the organization that doesn't have a lot of money and doesn't have a lot of time. And usually in corporation, the decision-making process takes not weeks, but months, sometimes years. Even negotiating the agreement takes ages. 4 months for negotiating an agreement is record time. So quite often when you start talking to a startup today and you are ready for signing an agreement within 12 months, it may happen that the startup already doesn't exist. So corporations have to be much faster in their decision making. Second thing, when you already start to cooperate, please support, but do not distract the startup. Quite often corporations they are used to be powerful, so they want to interfere into every detail, but unfortunately that will not help the relationship. And remember to be open to changes, because what is typical for the startup world is experimenting and discovering, and then when you discover new things, you have to adjust to the new reality, which means you have to pivot, you have to change. So corporations have to change their mind and be more open to those changes. Now, the path number two. Corporations can act like a startup. What does that mean? That means that corporations can go through the incubation program. The program that engages their employees and allows employees connected with people from outside of the organization create a solution, an answer to the question that is put at the very beginning. One of the projects that Innovatika was proud to do, and it was completed just a month ago, was the project that was called the Field of Innovation with Bonduelle. We have learned a lot during the whole process. We did a huge amount of research and then analysis of the data and insights that we collected when visiting the houses of our potential customers. Then we were creating a lot of ideas, tons of ideas and ideas. Then we were clustering them, and we were trying to make them more visible, and we were drawing them. And then we were testing the concepts. So we wanted to make sure that we are going the right direction. And you know what happened? Of course, we were changing directions. We learned quite a lot that our initial idea was not the perfect one, that our customers did not really respond in a way that we were expecting, so we had to pivot. And the lessons from this incubation path the path that is called act like a startup are the following. First of all, when you want to work with your people, you have to put a meaningful challenge at the beginning. If it is just fun activity, no one would treat it seriously. So you have to make it a challenge that is really powerful and connected to your strategy. Then people will be happy to engage. The next thing is that the corporation is not a space for entrepreneurship. It's more a space for performance and quality and compliance, and not necessarily for entrepreneurship. So we have to prepare management in order to run the incubator that is supposed to act like a startup. We have to learn people how to behave and how not to behave, what questions should not be asked if we really want to have a success at the end. And the other part is related to the people who are engaged in this process. When we are inviting people to the incubation program, we have to give a lot of people the opportunity to appear, because quite often we don't really expect who would be bringing the most valuable solutions. Quite often it turns out that the lady at the very small branch of the bank that would be far from the headquarters, that this lady is the one who is generating real value. And in some other situations, in some other projects, we could see a lady from, let's say, accounting, who would be the most powerful innovator in the whole team. So it's good to give people the chance to show up. And that was referring to the first part of the process. And now the second part of the process relates to the incubation program itself. And again, there are three main lessons that we have to share. First of all, ensure diversity. So make the team to be consisted of very, very different competences. It means that people from the organization can come from different parts of it. There should be people from outside, like Innovatika, for example, in our projects, is bringing always designers, is bringing service designers, sometimes IT developers if it is crucial for the project. But we can do one more thing in order to ensure diversity. At Bonduelle that I have mentioned, the project with Bonduelle, we have invited external experts, and they were just hired to be part of the teams. And it worked absolutely fantastic. They brought a totally new mindset and totally new questions. And it is also quite popular to invite startups to work with the teams. Then set tough deadlines. In corporations, it is pretty obvious that every project is a success, even if it is not done in a way that it was designed at the beginning in terms of schedule. You can just postpone the deadlines and it is okay. But in the startup world, it cannot work that way, because you will be just dead after a few months because you don't have resources to exist anymore. So you have to have very, very tough deadlines when you are a startup. And when you enter the incubation program, you should do exactly the same for the teams. Set very tight deadlines. And there is a very nice saying of Seth Godin, who says that deadlines are vitamins for creativity. So it is useful to use vitamins from time to time. So remember, deadlines are okay. And last but not least, honor failure, and don't be afraid of accepting risk and accepting the fact that you will have to pivot, that you will have to change the initial direction. And just last week, someone from Inoji Innovation Hub had a very nice example of the fact that their organization did not accept the fact that there was an event organized that would be called Fuck Up Night. Why? Because it's not corporate style. We cannot have an event and celebrate an event that is called Fuck Up Night. Why don't we rename this event? So finally, it was called Learning Party. So it is also okay to have learning parties. Of course, you can adjust into the language, but remember to honor the failure and accept the risk. And the last part of this process is related to implementation. And when you are implementing, you have to be really smart and fast. You have to do it in a very, very quick way in order to have the momentum, to keep the momentum. A very nice statistics of Samsung C-Lab shows that over 4 years or something, they had over 100 projects, and as you may see, 35% of them were just completed or dropped. 45% were transformed very quickly into business units and divisions. And they were people assigned to work on those ideas, on those concepts and launch them. And 20% of those ideas were transformed into businesses, into spin-offs. The third path is to build your own startup. Being a corporation does not mean that you cannot build your own startup. Of course you can. And the process is not so strange. You have to start with the challenge. You have to prepare the POC, which means proof of concept, and the incubation program can be your POC phase. And then you have to take off with another phase, which is called MVP, minimum viable product, which means that you are making a product that is already working. It does not have to be perfect. It can be operated manually on the back end, but it has to be able to provide value and to sell. And you have the opportunity then to check whether your offering is really accepted by the market and whether you can sell and you can make money on your idea. And then you are launching on the real scale, and you have to scale it up. And you have to remember that there is a totally different mindset necessary for building the company and launching it, and then to scale it up. You need a totally different mindset to scale up the company. It's different than launching and creating. And a few lessons, a few examples before, like Samsung C-Lab is one of the examples I have mentioned, or Deutsche Bahn Digital Ventures. It's also a very nice example. They have decided to do the startups based on ideas of their employees. And a really exciting, I would say, discovery that they had was the fact that people who were entering this program were not the young rebels that you may expect. Quite often, that were people who had 50 plus years. They were just ready to start their new adventure, and they didn't want to retire. They just want to keep feeling young and active. You can do it in many different ways. You can build the piece of business as we had the pleasure to do with Sodexo, which is now in the MVP phase, and it's just tested at organizations in Warsaw, and that is the benefit, additional benefit for employees that is available on the mobile phone. And you can have a first class lunch that is delivered on your desk during your workday. And now the lessons. The lessons from this scenario of building own startup by the corporation. First of all, you have to give the team the feeling of motivation. And quite often the right answer is to share the equity. What Deutsche Bahn is doing, they are giving up to 50% to their employees because they want people to be really, really engaged. Then you have to remember that you have to create a totally different environment for those who are going to create a startup. You cannot just put those people in the office close to this performance machine. You have to set up a separate infrastructure and totally different space for those people. And you have to really give them the autonomy to work. If you want those teams to work as your project teams, then it will cost much more money and much more time, and it's not worth it. You just have to believe, you just have to give some trust to the team and see what the results are, and answer the questions if they ask the questions. And the third one is referring again to time. Do not expect that the results will come after the first or second quarter. Remember that it's a long-term investment, and it's like the hockey key shape. The first years will not generate revenues, but then the startup will really boost if you give this time to the business to be validated and created. So the corporations can become future makers. They have to accept the fact that innovation can be an external thing, and they should take one of the three paths. Thank you very much.